What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Kilo Loco, and today we're going to be working with Flutter. So we're coming in at day 26 of hashtag 30 days of Flutter, and in this video I'm going to be showing you how to take a file. We're going to be working with the avatar image, and we're going to upload that to AWS Amplify Storage, which is our back end. So with all that said, let's go ahead and jump right on in. And if we take a look at where we left off last time, you can see that we have our profile set up. We can, change avatar by tapping that button. We'll hit up the camera. You'll take a look at my messy desk, then you'll take a look at, sexy me down here, right? Ooh, like that. And then once we take our picture, we use that photo and nothing happens on our profile. The reason for that is because we didn't add in the dummy logic to, essentially show that image. But if I were to uncomment this line, save it, then we have, big sexy right there in the picture. So what we want to do is whenever we take that picture, whether it comes from the camera or the gallery, we want to essentially upload that to storage so that we can, essentially reference that image wherever we need to. Now, what we want to do is we want to add the storage category to our Amplify project, because up until now we've only worked with auth and data or API, and we need to add in the third category, which is storage, which is going to be responsible for saving our image. So in our terminal, what we're going to do is we're going to do Amplify add storage. Now we're going to go with content because we're going to be storing images, right? And then you can give this, a friendly name. I'm going to go with the default by hitting enter. I'll hit enter again for the bucket name. And we're only going to allow auth users to view this content, which means that the user has to actually be signed in order to, access or write any of these files. So I'm going to do auth users only. We're going to give them all the different possible privileges, which is create, update, read, and delete. I just pressed A to select all. And then we are not going to be working with the Lambda trigger, so I'm going to hit enter for no. Once we're done with that, I'm going to do Amplify Push, and it's going to give us a summary of what we need to, what we are creating and what we are pushing. So as you can see, we had the API and auth already, no change there. But the storage category is going to be created, and do we want to continue? Hit enter for yes. Now this is going to take about 5 to 10 minutes to finish pushing to our backend and set up all the resources. In this case, it's actually going to be using S3 for our storage. And anytime we upload a file, it's going to be stored in an S3 bucket. And anytime that we, pull a file down or try to read or list a file, it's going to be coming from that same bucket. So 5 minutes, and then we'll come back. All right, awesome. That was actually pretty quick. It only took about 2 to 3 minutes, and we're done. Now, if I were to clear this with Command K, do Amplify Status, we should actually see that we now have all 3 categories and there are no changes anymore. So API, auth, and storage all set, ready to go. Now that we have our category added, what we want to do is go back over to main, make sure that we're configuring our app with the storage category as well, just like we did with the other 2 categories. So head over to main.dart. Let's go ahead and close this and expand this, make it big. Ooh. And now what we want to do is we'll add Amplify Storage as one of the plugins that we're configuring. Oh, but before we do that, let's head back over to the pubspec.yaml, right? And we need to add in the actual dependency. So we'll add in Amplify Storage S3. So now we have that added. We're saving that bad boy. We head back over to our main.dart, and now we can add in the Amplify storage category, like so. And we're looking pretty snazzy. So let's stop our app and let's run this one more time to make sure that we're able to actually still configure our app, and we are still getting our state going through, which means that Amplify was successfully configured. All right, here we go. Moment of truth. If we get back to our profile view, then we have successfully configured, and it blows up. Of course, it's red, just like this shirt. Okay, so the problem here is that if we take a look back over in our profile view, if I could ever find it, back in our profile view, remember that in the avatar part, I put this background image set to this file image, which is coming from our state, but we do not have an avatar path with this fresh launch. So if I comment this out and I save it, we should go back to the profile view. Everything's all nice, sexy, and finished, right? So we're going to fix that. But what we need to do first is we need to go through the process of being able to upload that actual image. So we know that Amplify is successfully configured. What we want to do now is we want to build out a repository that is responsible for interacting with Amplify Storage, just like we did with our data repository, which is responsible for interacting with Amplify Data Store. So let's go ahead and create a new file called Amplify, or call it a storage repository. As I mentioned, we're going to be using storage repository to interact with Amplify Storage. And what we need to do first is have an upload file function. So let's add that. So our upload file function inside of the storage repository is going to be returning a future string. Once again, asynchronous process, return future results, right? And our upload file function will be taking in a file as an argument. Remember, we can create a file from a picked file, and this will be an asynchronous process, right? We'll wrap everything in a try catch so that we're able to, bubble that error up if we need to handle it and show it. And what we need to do first is we need to create a file name. Now right here, I'm just going to simply create the file name based off of the date that the image is actually being uploaded at. It should be unique enough to where no two files should have the same date. Obviously that can be false, but this is the way that I'm going to choose to make this string, because this is just an example, but you can make it a little bit more complex however you want to. Then with that file name, I'm going to pass it into our Amplify Storage function, upload file. So we'll pass in the file, which is being passed into the function as an argument, right? So that's what the local will be. And then the key is going to be the file name, which is the date in this ISO 8601 string format, plus the .jpeg extension, because this is going to be an image. Now, if you were working with videos and audio files, obviously this is not going to just be .jpeg. It's going to be, whatever other format it's going to be in. But for our example, for this specific app, this is perfectly fine. Once we run this function, we're going to wait for a result. When that comes back, we will then get the key. The key is going to be the same thing as this file name plus this JPEG, as you can see right here. So we'll only be able to get the key back if we have successfully uploaded our file. Now that we have this in place, let's head back over to our profile block, and we can actually start taking advantage of this. So our logic for uploading files, or for handling images, is right here. So when we have this event open image picker, that's going to give us the ability to select that picked image, right? We're going to make sure that we do have a picked image and that it's not null, and then right here, you can see that we are simply passing back the picked image path, but that's not what we want to do. We want to actually upload that picked image. So I'm going to move this a little bit lower for right now, and then we'll come back and revisit what needs to actually change right here. But for now, what we want to do is we want to access our storage repo and then upload that file, right? So up here, just up at the top right here, what we're going to do is we're going to make storage repo part of one of the required arguments for our constructor, so that we can have an access, we can have an instance of it. So now we have an instance of our storage repo being passed in as an argument to our profile block. And as you can see here, I'm using the this.storage repo as opposed to using this type of constructor, so that we can just simply pass this value that's right here up into this container right here. So we're able to essentially hang on to the storage repo, unlike what we want to do with the user and the isCurrentUser values, which is passed into the state. So we want to have access to the storage repo here, unlike the user, which is only needed in the profile state. So now we scroll back down, and like I said, we have checked if our picked image is null, and if it makes it past that, we do have a picked image. So now we just do storage repo dot upload file, and then we pass in a file. So a picked image is not a file, but we can create a file from it. So we'll do file, and then we'll pass in our picked image.path. And we will also need to import file. I'm going to import it from Dart.io, and we should be good to go. Now we also want to access the key that's being returned from this function, right? And remember that this is an asynchronous function. So let's access the key like so. So now we have the image key that's being returned from this upload file function. And now that we have access to that key, what we want to do is we want to save this key with the actual user. So what we need to do is we need to also have access to our data repository so that we can update our user. So once again, back up here at the top, let's add in our data repository. And there we go. We have our data repo, just like we have our storage repo, right? And now we can access our data repository. What we want to do is we want to save the image key to that avatar user to their avatar key. So let's go ahead and update that user. So now we have our updated user, which is simply coming from our state.user. We're using the copy with constructor to recreate the same user with the only variation being the avatar key, which we're passing in from, the storage repo upload file function. And now what we should be able to do is update our user. So we need to go back over to our data repository, and in here we need to add a new function that's not just create user but also update user. And then we can update our user by saving it to data store and keeping everything in sync. So the update user function will take in an updated user. It's going to pass that user to amplify data store.save. Remember, save and update are pretty much the same thing. As long as the object has the same ID, it's simply going to overwrite it. It's going to overwrite that existing object. And then we're simply going to return that updated user. And instead of printing the error, I actually want to throw this error just so that we can bubble it up to the top and handle it if need be. Heading back over to profile block, we scroll back down and we can take advantage of that function that we just created in our data repo, like so. And then we just simply update user, pass in the updated user, and kablamo, we're done with that. So we uploaded the file to storage. We have now updated our user with a new avatar key so that we can reference that image and access it from storage whenever we need to. Now we want to display our image using the URL on our profile. So what we can do is we can create another function inside of our storage repo that will allow us to get the actual URL for the image and take that URL and pass it in as the avatar path for our state. And that will allow us to display the actual image. So now let's go back over to our storage repo, like I said, and we will create another function called getImageURL. So we implemented the get URL for file. We're going to pass in a file key, image key, whatever you decided to call it, and it's going to return our actual URL as a string. This is a relatively straightforward thing to do, or function call. We just do amplify storage.getURL. We pass in that file key and it spits out a result. The result will have a URL property on it, which we are simply returning from this function. So now that this is updated, let's head back over to our profile block again, right? And what we can do is we can get the actual URL from our storage. And there we go. We now have our image URL by accessing it from our storage repo.getURL for file. We pass in the image key, and then we take that image URL and we pass it in as the avatar path of our state. Now this will work and this will be completely fine, and it will do everything pretty quickly. We don't have to really worry about it, but the problem here is, one, I I forgot to do await right here. That's one of the problems. But 2 is that look at what we're doing. We're uploading the file, right? Which, you know, that's going to take some time. That's perfectly normal. But also what we're doing is we're doing an update to the database, and we're also doing a get URL, which is also an asynchronous task. So we have to wait for these 2 lines, right? When in reality, neither one of them depend on each other. So what we could actually do is we could run both of these 2 lines in parallel, and then we can get back the results and use the results as needed, but at least it will save us a little bit of time. So we can wrap that in a future.wait, and that will save us a little bit of time. And there we go. So now, since we're dealing with 2 asynchronous functions that can run in tandem, they can run at the same time in parallel, right? We can put them in this future.wait block, and we can run both of them at the same time. It'll save us a little bit of time, you know, milliseconds really, but hey, we want to be as fast and as sexy as possible. And then we will get results, which will contain an array or a list of results which we can access. Now, since we're only using 2, if we wanted to access the value from the data repo.update user, we can do results.first. Or if we wanted to access this one, which we do, we can do results.last, and that's exactly what we're doing. We're going to be getting a string back from this get URL for file, and we're going to be adding that to our avatar path right here. So we're yielding out a new state with the avatar path being whatever the result is of whatever the last result is of this results, which is going to be the storage repo.get URL. So now that we have all of that done, what we can do is we can actually head back over to our profile view, and we can make some changes because we don't want to actually build out a file image anymore. What we want to do is we want to build out a network image as long as there is one. Now, in the past, when I ran this and we didn't have a value, this would automatically turn to red like my shirt, and it'd be null everywhere and it'd be nasty. So we need to check to make sure that there is some type of value for the avatar path. And if there is not, then what we need to do is we need to just simply show the icon. So let's go ahead and implement that logic now. So with this change, what we're doing is we're now returning our ternary operation. We're essentially checking, does avatar path have a value or not? If it does not have a value, if it's equal to null, then we're going to just simply return our icon with the person icon, and it's going to be a size 50. However, if it does have a value, then what we're going to do is we're going to return the circle avatar, which is going to also have a radius of 50, and the background image is going to be the network image. So let's go ahead and save that, and let's see what that looks like. It looks a little bit different. What I want to do is I want to change this out a little bit so that we're keeping everything the same size and that we have our avatar in a circle just like we did before. And that's pretty much all the modifications I'm going to make there. So I essentially wrapped our person icon in a container, which is going to take that box decoration so that we can have this circle shape and also make it blue just like it was before. And then we add the width and the height to be 100, which is the same size as the radius of a circle, right? You know, radius is only half the diameter. So essentially we should have the same size circle avatar. Now, if I go ahead and select change avatar, I choose my camera, I give it, you know, good old duck face, right, like that. And then I use this photo. What we should do is we should be uploading that image. Now, it looks like we called this upload file on null, and that's because when we go back and I look at our profile view, you'll notice that we are actually missing those arguments. So first we need to add in the data repo, right? And we should be able to access that from our context. So we can do context.read, and we'll access our data repository, right? So that accounts for that one. But now what we also need to do is we need to pass in the storage repo. We can access that from our context. The only problem here is that we just created the storage context and we actually do not have it as being part of our context. So we need to make sure that we add that. So let's go ahead and first we're going to stop the app. We're going to head back over to our main. I believe that's where we're actually adding in our repository providers. And one of the other repositories that we need to add in now are the storage context. So we'll do repository provider context, and it's going to return, of course, a storage repo, right? We throw a little bit of a comma back there, and it should be good to go. Now, when we run it, we should be able to actually select the image, upload that image, and then also display that image using the URL that's provided from storage. All right, here we go. So now we open up to our app, looking good. We're going to do change avatar, and we're going to select the camera again. This time we do the little peace sign like that. Looking real cute. Ooh. Now we use that one. It should be uploaded. It should be downloaded. And as you can see, we have the image right there. And just for one last test, what we're going to do is we're going to run the app again and make sure that we're still able to display that image, because now it should be part of our database and we should be receiving back that avatar or that image key with that user, and we should be able to display that right when we open the app. All right, and here we go. So I think the image should load, and it did not load. Okay, so the reason why it didn't load is because we are actually not getting the image URL and then updating the state. So as you can see right here, if we take a look at the code, we are getting the URL for the file, and we're doing that whenever we update it, right? But what we need to do whenever we create this block is up here, we need to actually get the actual URL again, because we are just starting off with a fresh new block. We're not triggering this open image event or anything like that. So what we need to do is we need to get the URL for that image key that's associated with the user that's being passed into our constructor. And then when we get that back, then we can update our state. So let's add that in now. All right, so as you can see, inside of the constructor, after we do this super and provide an initial state, what we're doing is we're adding some logic whenever this block is created. So we're going to access our storage repo. We're going to get the URL for the file, and then that's an asynchronous operation that's going to return our URL as a string, right? So since it's asynchronous, what we're going to do is we're going to use the .then syntax. That's going to allow us to get the URL this way, as opposed to doing the async and await. We'll have the URL, and we'll add in a new event to our block, which we've already created, which is called profile image path, or provide image path, which is accepting an avatar path as a string, and we're going to pass in that URL there. Now that is going to kick off this event right here, this logic, which is going to yield out a copy of our state with the new avatar path being this. Now we could have also done that right here, where instead of yielding out a new state, we could just called a new event. We could have triggered a second event, but I felt like this was a little bit more efficient than having to watch for a different event and then going through the path to essentially do the same thing right here. So you could do it either way for this specific case when we're doing the open image picker event, and you can pass out different events as the logic progresses. But in this case, I felt like this was easier for the open image picker event. And then whenever we need to provide an image path somewhere else, like in the constructor, like we did right here, then we can just have a specified event for that specific process. So now what we're going to do is we're going to save this, and we're gonna give it a nice restart. All right, and here we go. So our app loads and bam, there we go. We got our duck face back. So as you can see, we are now able to get back our avatar, and we were able to upload it to storage, download it back again. We were able to handle the different block events and everything like that so that it can be viewed. And we're doing all this using our storage repository, which is the wrapper around our AWS Amplify calls. So that's going to be it for this video. In the next video, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be modifying our image so that we can actually cache it more efficiently, because we're going to need to be able to cache images in our social feed, which we're getting up to in the upcoming videos. And then we also need to be able to save the changes for our profile. So that's going to be in the next video. So if you want to see that and you want to know when it's released, make sure you subscribe to the channel. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out and join our Discord, and you could always ask me a question there or just come and hang out. So that's going to be it for today. Thank you for your time. Go out there and keep coding passionately.